And we're going to do it together. So here's the second part of the task. The second part of the task is the price per seat. We're not going to do that right now. I'm videotaping. So, but when I'm done, I'm going to come back and I'll support you what you need, okay? So the second part is pricing the seats in the arena. How do I do that? When I look at the bullet points, what do I have to do for my proposal? So the bottom half of the task, the first one was determine a reasonable price per game for each seat in the first row. If I would ask you for your proposal, and I'm not going to make you do it to save time, but how would you research what would a reasonable price be for a seat in the first row? You would go and you would look and it would be like you'd pretend to buy a ticket for a hockey game, right? And you could go to different arenas. Do they all cost the same? No. And you try to get a reasonable price of what a ticket would cost in the front row, the best one, right? When you hit the glass and when they hit each other and fight, you're right there on the TV, right? Doing all that. That's worth the most. So I'm going to go by what Mr. Dogs is already charging. So right now, what is he charging for the first row, if you read? And it says right now he's charging $6,000 per season for the first row, right? Now my question is, not for the whole season, but per what? So a question you have to ask yourself is, if it costs $6,000 for the whole season, what information don't you know that you need to know the price per game? You need to know how many games make up an entire what? Season. And not home and away, just the home games. So I'm going to help you. In an NHL season, every team has 41 home games. So how does that information help you figure out the price per game? So in an NHL season, every team has 41 home games. So if the whole season is $6,000, what would you do with that and 41 to figure out what's the price per game? And when you see the word per, you know you're dividing. So 6,000 divided by 41. Not quite. $146.34, right? Did you say dollars? That is going to be your A1. We're all going to use the same numbers for the second part. There's one area we won't. So everyone's going to use the same one for A1. If you don't want to, you can do your own research and figure out what a reasonable price would be. Next. That says NHL. Is that what you're looking at? Yeah, I hear you. NHL, National Hockey League. So my A1 is going to be what? $146.34. Now, Mr. Dogs wants the pricing of his seats to follow a geometric sequence. What is the formula for a geometric sequence? So, A1 times R to the exponent n minus 1, correct? We already know what A1 is. N. Do you know what N is going to be in this case? A is going to be the row number. So in other words, if I want to know how much it costs in the first row, I'm going to plug in 1 for n, and that will give me the answer, right? If I want to plug in, how much will it cost for the second row, right? I plug in 2 for n, right? And that and so on. I need to know what r is. And in the task it says, to determine the factor by which the cost of each seat per game will decrease. So r is going to be the decreasing factor. And in this case, r is actually going to be a percent as a decimal. So I want you to think through. You know that a geometric sequence means you're going to multiply something to get an answer, right? And then you multiply the again and again and again by the same number, right? If I took that number and multiplied it by 100%, do you know what I'm really multiplying it times? 100% is the same as what number? 1. So if I multiply it by 100%, that means the cost per row would never change going up. But we need the rows to decrease, meaning it should be cheaper the further away you are from the ice, right? If I go more than 100, like 120%, that number would be like 1.2, and then each row would actually increase in price, right? So I need to pick a number less than 100%, and then each row would actually decrease. So if I picked 90%, what would that number be? 0.9. If that's the factor, each row will decrease, right, as you go up, and that's what we need. So we need to pick a decimal between 0 and 1 so that each row decreases in price. We're going to do some estimating and some experimenting to see what should that factor be. Now, to do that, this is what we're going to do. We need to know what would be a reasonable price for the last row and then make it all fit. Now, in the performance task, it says for the last row, it costs $2,000 for the season in the last row. We already know that there's 41 games in a season. So how much does the last row cost right now per game? I need you to go 2,000 divided by 41. $48.78. Did you get that? So right now, how much does it cost in the last row? $48.78. We're now going to make that our AN, our last row. So I'm going to come back to this formula to help us know what the ratio should be to price out the seats. So we're going to use, again, this formula. So what number am I going to put in for AN? 48.78. A1, we said, was going to be, and everyone's using the same numbers, $146.34. R is what I'm looking for. And N, what row number is that? I'm going to solve for R, and that number needs to be between 0 and 1 to find the factor I'm going to use to charge for each row. So how would I solve for R? What number is in front of R right now? So to undo that, I'm going to divide. You're just going to write it as a fraction, and you're going to have a decimal inside the fraction, and it's okay for your calculator, because we're eventually going to use our calculator at the end. And 42 take away 1 is 41. How do I solve for R? And the question is, how do I undo a power? And you have to do the root, right, that goes with it. So what's the power right now? So what root, what number is going to go inside that root? And what goes inside? That is what R equals. So I'm going to teach you where that is again on your calculator. Now we need our calculator again. Do you know what button I'm going to press to get this? Can you get that on your calculator? And then you're going to put 41. You can see the screen. Go shift, and it's x to the square. Underneath, you're going to put 48.78, and in the denominator, 146.34. What ratio did we get? 0.97356. Now, does that number seem reasonable in terms of what the pricing should be for each row? That means each row that is away from the ice will go down by that percent. So, if the first row costs $146.34, then how would you find the price in the second row? Is you'd multiply it by that factor, 0.97356. How much would the next row cost? $142.42. What would you get? Again, multiply it by 0.97356. And what would the third row cost? $138.70. Can you see how that's reasonable for each row? Each row is a little less cheaper than the one before, right? In terms of the pricing structure. So, this is going to be our factor. So, the bullet points, let's make sure we answer them all. So when it says determine a reasonable price per game for the first row, what did we say that answer was? $146.34. When it says determine the factor by which the cost of each seat per game will decrease, do you see the math we did? And what was the answer? What was the factor we had? 0.97356. And then it says determine the price per game of each seat in the last row. Well, we did that. What was the price for the seats in the last row? $48 and then the last part was clearly explain any assumptions you made in determining the number of seats in each row. I'm going to help you with that in terms of the assumptions, because on my calendar right now, I have examples of what I expect in terms of what this task will look like. And on those examples, you'll see the assumptions that were being used, and then you can use those assumptions for your paper. And that's it.